What's up, guys, and welcome to the Rebalance podcast, where we dive into topics that matter most when it comes to overcoming struggles, injuries, and finding balance in your life. Everybody's idea of balance is that bit different, so my goal is to give you different perspectives, practical tips, as well as expert insights into what it means to live a balanced life. My name is Robbie Cassidy. I'm a physiotherapist and a health coach, and I've been helping people reignite their love for challenge, overcome their fear, and find more balance in their life through the process of self-development. So, let's get into it. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. On this episode of the podcast, we are going to look back on the year. So it's going to be the 9 powerful reflection questions that you can use for yourself, but I'm also going to talk about my experience for 2023. And as we look forward to 2024, some of the things that we can start to work on. I think one of the big ones for me, and it's funny, I pulled up the sheet from last year when I was doing the reflection questions, and I was able to see what I had last year. So I'm going to talk through some of those and see if I was able to improve on them or see where I fell down in some cases. And it was really interesting. I have to say, it was really interesting to look back on the things that I had said last year, on what I would like to improve on, what I would like to do better, what I would like to avoid, and get an understanding and see, was I successful in them? And in some of the cases I was successful, in other cases I wasn't as successful as I would have liked to have been. But without further ado, we will jump straight into it, because I want you to be able to take these questions and I want you to be able to use them yourself. And the podcast that I put out last year got a lot of traction, a lot of people were interested in it, and a lot of people were able to take advantage of it. So if you are listening to this, if you listened last year, or if this is your first time listening, I would love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear your own experience on the questions in terms of what you improved on and what you felt was needed work. Now, to jump into it, I guess the very first question, we can look at all these personally, professionally, physically, whatever way you want, whatever way you're comfortable. It is important to be honest when you're doing these things, I think, because we can lie to ourselves, and there is an element of telling yourself a better story. I understand that, and it's important to do that. And I think people miss out on that. The stories we tell ourselves make up our lives, make up our experience. So it is important to tell yourself the right stories, but it's also important to reflect, be honest with yourself, and see what you need to improve on. There's no point being so disconnected from the truth that you don't ever act on the things because you've given yourself excuses or reasons not to act on them. Now, question 1 is, what made you feel most happy in the last year? And this can be big or small. It can be daily habits, it can be weekly, it can be monthly, or it can be one event that may have happened or that happened throughout the year. When you're thinking about what makes you most happy, like I always talk about, the word happy is a difficult one to define, because do we like to be, when we think about happiness, do we like to be excited or do we like to be content? What is being happy itself? Because obviously you can be feeling good and you're going around and you have that euphoric feeling. That's, I guess, is another way of describing it. But I think for me, when I ask them what it's like to be happy, they often use the word content. I like it both ways. I think it mixes and matches. I think it's important to have both sides of it, that being excited and waiting for something, and being excited that you've achieved something. I don't know if you can be excited about something after it happens, but still having that idea of that you're happy with the way things turned out, that you're content with the way things turned out, or excited to do something in future, maybe is probably a better way of describing it. For me, honestly, this probably sound like, oh, why would you say? For me, one of the biggest things was actually being able to work and help people. Working in something that I'm passionate about is a huge thing for me. The fact that I'm able to still live my life and have the lifestyle that I want, to be able to travel around, move around, set up in different countries, and manage my schedule and manage my work, that's a big one for me. And I think that a massive side to that is the fact that I think when you look at the work that you do, when you look at your day to day, a lot of the time we look at the purpose of what we feel is what's purposeful for us, like what feels like it's your purpose, you're doing the right thing for you. And honestly, for me, it is a huge part of that, is being able to help people and being able to work with people. Sometimes to the detriment of when I get into conversations with friends and family, that I find it difficult to switch off of that coaching zone, or not coaching specifically, but that physio mindset. And I know for some people, especially close friends who don't need to hear it all the time, it can be challenging. So I do really enjoy that. I know there's shortcomings to that as well. But yeah, being able to help people, being able to work people in a physio capacity, in a health capacity, is a huge one for me. And honestly, that has to be, I think, one of the number one things for me when I look back at the year, about what I really, coming off the back of last year, and last year was a bit of a difficult one for me, and anyone who listened to the podcast would have known it was a challenging year with different things that happened. And when all of the dust settled on that in the ways that it could, and I look back on this year, that was the idea of still being able to get up every morning. When I get off a call with the client and I still feel content, I still feel happy about that. That's a huge thing that I look back on over the year and say that's a big point. Other ones then is having friends that were able to come and visit me, and having a family then that obviously that loves me. Well, I would hope so. I think that's two big ones, and it's important to be grateful for those. I'm definitely the person who is not, or in the past has not been as good at practicing gratitude as I should have been. And I think this year was a big eye-opener for me to be more grateful for the things that I have right now, because things can change. And the last year, that was a big one. Last year, I lost a close friend of mine, and I noticed that things can change in an instant. So it is important to be grateful for, obviously, the memories and the experiences that you've had in the past, but for what you have at the moment. And having friends to come over. When I was in Argentina, I had 2 or 3 different friends that came over and visit me when I was there. Same in Brazil. That's a huge thing for me to be grateful, to be lucky enough to have that around me. The other thing was, in a sporting context, I was very happy to be able to train consistently with jiu-jitsu throughout the year. It was something that I really wanted to focus on, and it was a thing that I wanted to improve on. And I was lucky then to win the Argentina Campeonato at the end of the year. Now, I did get injured before another competition, which I'll talk about later, which is a bit awkward, but it was a good one for me as well. I was happy to be able to do that. And then I guess the next one is being conversationally fluent in Spanish. I think that was another nice one for me, because when I was growing up, I was ignorant to learning languages. In terms of I don't feel that I need to learn a language because everyone would speak English when I was a child. So, and I was completely ignorant to that fact that I'm missing out on so many other cultures in the world by not trying to speak a language. And I really struggled because of that. I had that barrier that I put on myself, and that obstacle that I always had to overcome, that it wasn't going to be worth it, that there was no need to spend time and energy. Like, I did French for way too many years, like too many years to count that I can't speak French right now. Like, I'm talking about, I did French in school from primary school up till probably TY or 5th year in secondary school, and my French is still diabolical. But so that was one thing, and I talk about it later on in the podcast, is that coming into this year, I wanted to become more conversationally fluent in Spanish. And it's only when I moved to Brazil that I realized that I was a lot more fluent, not fluent by any means, but a lot more conversational in Spanish, which was nice. Otherwise, I think the other thing was being able to focus on one project consistently. Learning about focus and learning about back pain really made me happy, because I was able to just go into deeper levels on the same subject without being interrupted on it. And I found it fascinating. There's such an interesting aspect of back pain, that some of it's psychological, some of it is physical, there's the emotional, there's so much to it. And this year, I was really able to take time to learn about the different levels to it while working with clients. And I really feel that I was able to learn a lot about that, which at the end of the year, obviously I've been doing it for the last 7 years, but this year specifically, I feel that I really leveled up on my knowledge of back pain, dealing with back issues, dealing with emotional issues, dealing with chronic issues in general. And that was a nice one. That makes me happy to think back on the year of something that I was able to improve on. The last one on that actually was that overcoming minor struggles throughout the year. I know that sounds like a funny one, but being able to set up in Argentina and then coming to Brazil and being able to set up in Brazil and kind of creating friend groups and social circles and routines and learning about the place, that was a nice one for me. When I went to Argentina, I was still very I wasn't grounded by any means at all, because that was lingering in the back of my mind all the time about Rowan him having passed away, and I was unsettled to say the least. And when I did get there, I remember the first day in Argentina when I went, and a friend of mine, he texted me, who had lived there before. He said, just try get this set up and get your phone sorted and stuff like that. And the first day when I did that, when I was able to go around, was able to use a little bit of Spanish here and there and get everything set up, I remember coming back and being in the elevator and just like, I can remember literally standing in the elevator, putting my hands in the air and being just like, I can't believe I did that. Like, that was a huge one for me. It was so small, but it was like, I've just ticked off the first box. I'm after flying 16 hours. I was wrecked. In Argentina, if anyone knows, you don't buy anything with your card. You have to get cash sorted because of the inflation. I had no phone that was working properly, so I had to get that set up, and I kind of had to get to know the place around me, getting food and stuff like that, getting shops in and stuff. That was so that for me was a big achievement, and I remember that's one of the times of the year that really stands out to me, that I was able to be like, okay, that was a successful trip right there. So they were the main things that really, when I look back, made me happy throughout the year. But honestly, overcoming the minor struggles was an interesting one, because I didn't realize that would make me as happy as it does, and it does push you on. Like, when there's an obstacle there and you overcome it, I think that's a massive thing to draw confidence from and to draw happiness from. Now, the next one is, what made you unhappy this year? So what was the time that you had maybe significant doubt, times where you felt like you weren't fulfilled, weren't enjoying an experience or an event? And why was that? What caused it? Did you not enjoy the whole thing, or was there just elements of it that you didn't enjoy? And when I look at what made me most unhappy this year, the most glaring one, obviously the most obvious one was missing my friend, and that came in waves, which I thought was an interesting one. It comes in waves at different times, and anyone who has experienced loss or experienced grief will understand that it's obviously, it's there in the background, but then it does come on in waves, no question. That was a big one for me, and it made me more unsettled at the start of the year. But as the year went on, and as I was kind of more grounded in myself and more, more confident in myself in improving things, that became, I was able to deal with it better, I feel. At the start of the year, I wasn't as effective at dealing with it, but as the year went on, I started to improve. Another one that made me unhappy this year, and I haven't actually mentioned this anywhere yet, anyone who has been following the podcast or following my Instagram knows that I injured my knee, which is, and I'll do a completely other podcast on this, looks like I've torn the ACL in my knee, some crack, really enjoyed it. So that was a big one for me that made me most unhappy, because I know now it's going to be a nice little path to getting it all fixed and getting it right again. And I will talk about in another podcast if I'm going to go the surgical route or not. Right now it's improving at a rapid pace, so I'm very happy to be able to do all the activities that I want to do right now, and if in time I need it, then I'll get it. But as of now, I'm pretty happy with the way things are and how it's improving, and I'm learning a lot about it as well. I'm learning a lot about the thought patterns. Like, I always talk to people about, we need to block out these thought patterns. We need to be careful about these ones, because they can put you into a cycle of pain and injury and losing confidence in yourself and that. And I am having to work through all of those myself right now, which is really interesting. Another one as well was people will be like, I will never do jiu-jitsu the way I talk about this, but it's jiu-jitsu, the enjoyment out of doing jiu-jitsu. And I didn't mention that. I said obviously training consistently, definitely one of the things that made me happiest throughout the year. Completely, the enjoyment that you get out of doing jiu-jitsu completely, for me, overshadows any of the injuries and any of the issues that you get from it. It is especially if you're going to do it competitively, which is what I was doing. I was training competitively. I was training with a team who were training competitively. Like, there was in the one class of maybe 15 people, there was 6 of them were the national champions, so they were solid guys to train with, and those guys don't go lightly, so you have to learn to pick it up with them. With that though, you obviously pick up different issues, different injuries, and one of them that I got, staph, is something I've had a couple of times, a staph infection, for anyone that knows what that is. Now, this time I got a staph infection. I managed it well. I pulled back from training. I stayed doing little bits and pieces, bandaged it up, was able to go to the gym and stuff. Didn't recover properly though. Like, I know myself, I didn't recover properly. A lot of people take antibiotics straight away for staph. I didn't want it this time because I did it in the past. It wipes me out when I do that. I did it in the past and I had got staph before and I was able to get over it. But this time, because I wasn't recovering properly and I was still training hard, and I wasn't doing jiu-jitsu, I was just training in the gym, still training like twice a day though, which was having its effect on the body. My elbow blew up massively. So I got this bursitis in my elbow, like it was like a jelly roll on the side of my elbow, which I had no idea what it was. Looking back on it now though, I was definitely probably pushing a bit too much, which is a big learning point for me this year. I was probably pushing it a small bit too much, and I ended up getting sepsis, which is no crack, so it's whatever, blood poisoning. And being sick in a foreign country when you don't have anyone to rely on and you don't know how to speak the language to go to the hospital, that was a challenging time for me. I remember I was on the phone to my sister, who's a doctor, and I'd named the symptoms, and as I was naming them out loud, I knew myself what was after happening because I never really put them together. I was like getting a lot of confusion, kind of forgetting where I am, not knowing what's going on, like have brain fog, cold sweats. I had the majority of the symptoms of blood poisoning, and she was like, you probably need to go to the hospital right now, which I did, and I muscled through. It was funny, it was actually a Brazilian helping me in the hospital who spoke perfect English, which worked out very well. But I do remember, as I was saying, not having anyone to rely on is a big part, and no one there that's kind of, do you know when you're sick, you feel like it's nice to have somebody there to just be like not taking care of you as much, but just someone that you can rely on for small things, because I was fried. When it had got to this point, I was fried. But that was definitely something when I look back on the year that made me unhappy. And then the other one was missing out on the Argentina Open. That was a big one for me. I had been training, as I said, all year for this. It was my main sports goal of the year. I was literally training 9 times a week, and 10 days before the competition I tore my ACL, which is a killer. And I will talk about it, as I said in another podcast. I diagnosed it as a different diagnosis because until I realised what actually had happened, I was still going to do the competition. I was talking about it differently on Instagram because of that fact. I was doing the competition, but then I had a really bad slip one day and my knee slipped. I had a nice little jerk off it, so I said I better not do the competition. And actually I signed up for the competition, but they didn't put me in a bracket, so obviously someone was looking down on me and said, you're not going into it. But being out of routine for too long and living in a city were other things I feel that really affected me and made me most unhappy this year. Being in routine is obviously good, but being out of routine, it's a double-edged sword, and I'll talk about that later on. But living in a city, honestly, for a guy who comes from the countryside of like the closest shop to me is like 10 kilometers away, the living in a city where there's construction going on across the road, there's people beeping horns, angry at each other for no reason on the road. Like, I won't even get into that. I don't even understand that way of thinking. You're making yourself angry for no reason. Me trying to record podcasts, people blaring on the horn, killing me. But yeah, that was a big thing. Living in a city for me was a difficult, consistently for the year was a challenging thing. I didn't really realize that until I came to Brazil and I had the beach and I had the water, the ocean, everything, the mountains, the trees, that I was like, wow, I really miss that. And I think honestly, for some people it suits them and they love it. For others, it doesn't suit them, and for me, it really didn't suit me. Now, looking at the next one, so they were the things that made me most unhappy this year. When we look at what's the biggest lesson or lessons you learned this year, this is question number 3. I want you to think about revelations here, things that kind of shocked you, things that stood out to you. What was something that happened to you or someone around you that made you change the way you think or do something? As well as how did it change you, or why did it change you, or was it a positive or negative learning experience? When I think back on lessons from the year, it's hard to divide the lessons from the things that made me happy and things that made me most unhappy, because a lot of the time they come together. I think something that makes you very unhappy, as I was saying about the city, that's a big lesson for me that I know that I'm not a city person. You know, that's just, it's not going to be me. It was a lesson, no question. Other simple lessons were like like training around injury, understanding how to train around injury. That was a really, really big one for me. Like understanding, okay, you get injured, so you can still train, but there's certain things you can't do, and getting an idea of the load management side of things of that was massive. And that was a big lesson for me. Another huge lesson for me, and this comes in the aspect of the coaching realm as well as the health world, is that the impact of time and sleep on the subconscious was glaringly obvious for me this year. And why I say that is that oftentimes when you're talking to a client and you're trying to get a point across, and you're trying to you're giving examples, you're doing things, and it just feels like it's not connecting, it's not hitting right there. I think this is the same with Instagram as well, where it feels like that just hasn't hit right. They didn't understand that. And then I jump off the call and I come back onto the next call 2 weeks later, and they have a really good understanding of the point that I made 2 weeks ago, where I was thinking coming back onto the call, okay, how can I say this in other ways? And I think when you're looking at introducing a new idea or a new concept or a new way of living or a way of dealing with something, you can't underestimate the effect of time and sleep on that. Because sometimes people will pick it up straight away and be like, oh, that makes sense. But the majority of the time, you're battling people's old beliefs. So it's going to take a small bit of time to seep in. And that's why I was just on a call with a lady today who was dealing with a shoulder issue. And I was saying, I just said there straight off, I can give you banded pull aparts, I can give you farmer's carries, I can give you single arm row. Technically, you're hitting the majority of the shoulder with those exercises. But because it's a chronic issue, that's not going to fix it in 2 weeks. And if you continue and I give you those exercises and it's going to help it, but it won't fix it completely, and it flares up again in 3 weeks, you're going to look back and say, the stuff they gave me didn't work. So that's why with my coaching and with the programs that I do, and I actually extended the back program that I have available at the moment, which is I have a group starting very soon, so check the description in this podcast for that. I will talk about that later on. I extended it from a 6 to 10 week because at the 6 week mark, people were getting through it. They were doing really, really, really well. But then at the 7th week mark, I was getting questions on what do I do now when this happens. Then I was like, okay, I remember this. There's usually around this 6-7 week mark, and there's usually around about the 3rd week that people run into certain barriers. And I felt that, okay, it was all covered. But then when I went back and I was reviewing it and I was chatting to everyone who had gone through it, they were like, yeah, but then I hit this barrier. So I had to go back to week number 4 to go over these videos again. So I said, okay, I'm going to add in extra videos and bring it up to a 10 week. So that way you don't have to go back to week 4. You're going to tackle the obstacles as they come up. And they're little obstacles, like little flare-ups, things that where old patterns start to creep back in again. But as I was saying, the impact of the subconscious is huge in sleep, because when you introduce an idea, it takes that couple of weeks for that idea to kind of blossom, to flower. And expecting it to be just there and then remove the ego of trying to get a point across to someone right now. And instead, you just plant a seed. And you just say, look, just try this out for the next couple of weeks and see how it works for you. And I found that some of the biggest successes I had this year with clients came from that idea of just introducing the idea and letting it blossom by itself, and then coming back and chatting to them again about it and saying, well, how has it worked for you? And then they'll tell me this worked, this didn't work, and then we'll make a few changes. But if you go straight in and you lay out an idea and you try to make those changes in the moment, oftentimes it doesn't work. So I learned so much about how time and how sleep really impacts the subconscious. And every time someone sleeps, they have a better idea of something. And then I started to use this to my own advantage as well, where I would say I would try to tackle a really difficult task, and I would, knowing that I'm not going to have an understanding of it right now, but in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to have a better understanding of it. And just because I went at it hard at the start, kind of broke those connections to form new connections, to form new beliefs, and then I was able to get a really good understanding of it. That was a huge one for me. Honestly, it's a big, big one. And maybe it comes from the idea of, as I often talk about in the podcast, of Hemingway, where he writes a note down, the author, where he writes a note, he goes to sleep, he wakes up the next day and he answers it. it is that way a small bit as well. So, and I've come then to talk when I'm talking to friends, family, or when I'm talking to people I'm working with, where it's like introducing, well, what is something that you would be interested in doing, but not right now, within 6 months or 12 months time. Because once you get the cogs turning, it starts to become a lot easier then to understand that. And every sleep that you have, every time you wake up, you're going to have a little bit of a different understanding. So if you just keep adding little bits of information along the way, you're going to develop a better understanding, overall understanding of it. So yeah, that was a huge one. That was a really, really interesting one for me. And then as I said, I applied it to everything after that. I applied it to jiu-jitsu, where I would try a new move and then I would just leave it and I would come back to it then in a while and see how it develops. Playing the guitar, I would do the exact same thing. I would try something really difficult, go to the point that it pisses me off, which is actually what you're supposed to do for neuroplasticity, for your brain to change. You kind of need to get pissed off because it releases the hormones and the neurotransmitters associated with change. So it's important to do that. Agitation is what you need to get to. But anyway, go on the guitar, play a little bit of guitar, try out a new thing, know that it's not going to work, and then come back to it a day later, and then try it again, and then come back to it a day later, and then just look to refine that pattern. Because it's funny how much sleep helps that. Every time you sleep, it just becomes a little bit smoother. So as I said, I did it in jiu-jitsu. I did it when I was trying to learn Spanish, where I started reading like Spanish poetry. I started listen to like a Spanish podcast for like an hour, where I would understand so little, and I'd be just trying to pick it up. But I do it on a topic that I was interested in, like UFC. So I knew then that, okay, I have an idea what they're talking about, but I will hopefully connect these again. And then I would listen to it again in weeks to come. I tried listening to the same podcast, and you'd find that you'd pick up on a lot more of the topics they were talking about. So that was a huge one for me, as I said, is that impact of time and sleep on the subconscious. And the other thing is that when you understand that, and you understand how malleable the subconscious is and how it picks up on these things and kind of, as I said, it flowers these seeds, then you understand how those around you can really impact your thinking. You come to understand that the people that are in your life and the community and the environment that you're in has a huge impact on your thinking, because all someone needs to do is mention a topic to you when you're in a state of mind that's a bit more, what's the word for it? Agreeable. That's the word I was looking for. When you're in a state of mind that's a bit more agreeable, if someone mentions a topic to you, you're more likely to pick it up. Now that could be that, or more agreeable means that you could be, I don't know, slept poorly, so you pick up on things and you just take them as is. So that's why it's important to understand that the people around you are going to have a huge impact on your thinking. And if you're around people that are not aligned with the way that you want to live in future, you have to manage that better. You really do. And you have to, like, you can be honest about it as well, and you can say to them that there's certain elements here that I just need to stop picking up on. I remember chatting to a friend of mine who was building a business, and he said I had to move away from my family because there was a kind of a financial crisis, or he described it as more like a poverty mindset, where money was needed, like it was scarce and it was needed. And he said I needed to get out of that environment because it drove my understanding of money, and it drove my way of thinking about it, and it really affected the business that he was in. So not his wife and kids or anything like that. Now his family, like his parents and his brothers and sisters. He didn't just leave them to think about money. So that was an interesting one. So the people around you can have a huge impact on your thinking, and sometimes you need to look at your community and how you can change that. And then another, absolutely, when I look at a mammoth of one that I learned this year, was the benefit of focus and disconnection, and the benefits of solitude. And like when I was in Argentina, there was weeks gone by that I wasn't chatting to anyone on the phone, that I was so focused on just working and improving myself, and working on jiu-jitsu and improving the back pain program and learning more about it, like going into so many levels of it. That was a huge one. It's like understanding the benefit of focus. And I think another one is that, like, when you look at focus, how many people do you know have done 15 different types of jobs, and they say, no, that wasn't right for me, no, that wasn't right for me, well, that wasn't right for me. When I take a step back and I look at it more, it's like there's an element of that it's discipline and focus that's affecting your ability to continue on down that path. And it may not be in the first week. You may be motivated for the first week, but when you get to month number 4 or month number 5, and you're deciding, okay, well, this isn't for me, or like you something's not working for you, and then things are going on in your life, and then you decide to drop it all, and then you change onto something new. It's a real grass is greener on the other side. And I just noticed that, like, every time that you break through those patterns of when it's like, I want to drop all this, I'm sick of doing this, I want to drop it all, literally every single time that you do it, the next week, when you break through that, the next week is sometimes the most powerful week that you'll have throughout the whole year, where you can double down on it. You have a completely new perspective on it, and it comes back to that idea of the time and sleep on the subconscious, but it just comes back to the other idea of being focused on one thing for a long time, no matter what. Just being disciplined on it is huge. Like, it gives you so much. It gives you so much purpose, so much happiness as well from it. So that was a huge one that I think played a role. I have another one here, but I'm only on question 3, and I have a couple more to go through, so I don't want to be... Okay, I will, because this is one that blew my mind, but it kind of ties into the other stuff. How nature and the consciousness play a role in health. Oh, I started this one now. This is going to be a minute. So this was another one that blew my mind. These are podcasts in themselves. So to jump into it, I'm going to make it short. So the idea that nature versus consciousness and how it plays a huge role in health is that when you look at nature is very cyclical. There's obviously random elements to it, but it is very cyclical. You have your summer, you have your winter, you have your spring, you have your autumn, you have night and day, you have the life cycles of things, you have the cycle of the moon, the sun, the stars. You have all these different cycles that are going on all of the time. The life and death cycle, the breakdown, rebirth, all of this. Now, in itself, nature, when working by itself, is predictable, you could say, kind of. But when you look at the consciousness side of it, that adds an other element to it. So when we start to look at things too scientifically, based off of this, you'll find that there's something throwing a spanner in the works, and that is the consciousness. And I feel that with consciousness, that changes everything, because now you can start to make better decisions. In nature, you go by your natural cycle, but because you have consciousness, you make decisions based on certain elements of life. So you decide to lean into medicine a bit more. You decide to live a healthier life. You decide to live a less healthy life. You decide to live a life that's detrimental. You decide to make bad decisions. You decide to make good decisions. You plan. You decide to be around certain people. And all of this then will have a huge effect on your health. Now, that doesn't happen as much in other animals, where they're a little more cyclical and where their life is that much more cyclical. But it does happen in humans. So that was a understanding that I had, or that was a thing that really stuck out to me throughout the year, is that we need to really focus on what we can control. There's certain things that we can't control that are going to be nature in itself, but we can control the consciousness more than we can control other things. And when you have to take the consciousness into account, that means you have to think about things differently, because it does affect everything around us. And it comes back to like that idea of, in health specifically, why the placebo effect is so effective, why the way someone thinks can have a huge impact on their recovery and the way that their life is, and why a negative thought pattern and catastrophization can have more negative impacts on life. Now, I'm going to leave it at that, because I will do a full podcast on that again in future. But that was a really one that really stuck out to me. I just thought it was such an interesting one, is how you have your consciousness, but then you have nature, I should say, that plays its role, but then you have your consciousness that's going to play with nature in a slight way. Another one then is that many of the diagnoses, I'm just going to park this one, but many of the diagnoses that we create can become crutches, and then those crutches become a way for someone to relieve responsibility for improving themselves. And I see this all the time, where people do it unbeknownst to themselves, where they look for a diagnosis, and you can get a diagnosis on anything right now. Like, you can just go on Google, type in something, and they'll give you a diagnosis. I remember hearing a diagnosis during the year about staying up late on your phone later at night, and I remember when the person said it to me, I was like, no, that's just discipline. That's just going to bed earlier. That's not that's not a diagnosis. That's just, you need to be disciplined to go to bed earlier. That, like, if you use that as a diagnosis and just say that's the way I am, Okay, grand, but you're relieving responsibility on what you can do. But if you say, okay, I can see this now and this is something that I do, let's work on a pattern, or let's work on improving that. And I think that's something that the lady that said that to me now will be listening to this podcast, and I'm going to hear it on the next call, hopefully. But that's something that we need to focus on more, is that diagnoses are there because they help to dictate a direction, but they're not a way to live. You don't live your life as much as possible. There's certain ones you may have to, obviously, but many of the newer ones are just becoming crazy. Some of the diagnoses, like saying that your back pain is because of degenerative disease. Like, that's crazy. That's not true. That's like saying someone with wrinkles has back pain. That's exactly what you're saying. That person has grey hair, that means they have back pain. No, just because people as they get older get grey hair, and people as they get older move less and decondition more and have different thoughts and different beliefs and different ways about their body, more likely, and then they also have grey hair, okay, and now also they have back pain. That's like correlation versus causation. You need to be careful about that. But the diagnosis become a crazy side to that. Another interesting one, and I will talk about this as well, is the actual effect of a bulging disc, because I haven't mentioned it yet, but you'll hear it now, and it's probably going to come out on Instagram during the week because I have a post on it. I ended up getting 2 bulging discs in my neck from jiu-jitsu because I was an idiot, but I will talk about that in more detail. And I knew the actual effect of it, of how it's shooting down your arms and all that, and then I got such a good understanding of how to treat it. I remember being like, it was a really interesting one for me. Question number 4 is, what do you wish you could have done more of the last year? You yourself, what is something that you feel that you could have done more of the last year? Was it something that what was something that you did that you enjoyed, but you didn't get a chance to experience enough of it? Is there a habit or behavior that you feel that you should have been more consistent with? And if you did, why did you feel that way? Are you being honest with yourself, or is it something you feel, or something do you think you should feel? Like, is it an outside influence? So what's something that you wish you would have done more this year? And what's something that you wish you didn't prioritize high enough? Why didn't you prioritize it? Was there something else in the way? Did you not realize it at the time? That's a big one, is that you don't even realize it, and then you look back and you're like, "Phew, I could have been better at that." And for me, one of the big ones was chatting to family and friends. I went so deep into the whole of solitude, which is, so I was talking about, it's a double-edged sword, where you learn so much from it, and it's so much personal development there, that I didn't really talk to anyone outside of, let's say, different experts in the area. But like, in terms of my family and friends, I didn't really talk to that many of them at the time, when I was really deep in it for weeks at a time. I know that my mother definitely didn't like that, but I didn't. I was bad, and there was definitely friends that felt like I was ignoring them and stuff, and it wasn't. It was just that I had gotten so deep in this hole that I kept on going down and down and down into this, that I just didn't put time aside, because I knew what I was too focused on the next step. This is the next thing I need to do. This is the next thing I need to do. And that definitely was a detriment, that I didn't speak to them as much as I would have liked throughout the year. Another one is explored more of Argentina. I got to see Buenos Aires. I got to see Cordoba. I got to see Rosario, where Messi's from. I got to see Messi actually at a game, which was a big one for me. It was good fun. And I think that I wish I got to see more of it. But I've already planned in future, like in the next few weeks to months, to go back to Argentina and seeing the south. Such a big country. It's the 8th biggest country in the world. And when you are there, it's massive. It's way bigger than it looks on a map. That was a big one. The other one is getting out of the city more and trying to get into nature a bit more. I think knowing now how much of an effect it had on my mental and physical health, that's something that I would look at doing more. Trying other sports, but that's a double-edged sword, as I said, because I didn't want to do any other sports. I just wanted to do jiu-jitsu all of the time, every day, and I took advantage of that, which was definitely good. I think another one was playing group sessions with friends, in terms of playing guitar and having singing sessions with friends. We did that a few times, but not as much as I would have liked, which leads me to focusing on one specific part of the guitar more. I think would have helped me. I don't know if anyone else does that, where I just use the guitar as a way of kind of clearing the head. So I just picked it up and never really practiced anything. So I know come the end of the year, I hadn't really improved that much on it. But obviously you can only spend energy on certain things. And yeah, I guess that's another big one. A learning point is that you have so much energy, and how you allocate it is really important. So that's the idea of solitude is massive. And then journaling as well. Journaling was something that I've gotten into more now, But throughout the year, I wasn't as consistent with it. I was really consistent with meditation, but not with journaling as much. And I'm finding that I'm becoming better at that now. Question number 5. What's something you want to do less of next year? Oof, interesting one. So what did you do this year that you felt you may have taken over? And then what's something that you want to do less of next year? Well, I'll tell you first off, last year, what I said I wanted to do less of this year was Netflix. I said I didn't really want to watch a lot of Netflix for no reason. And I didn't. I can't. Over the whole year, I watched about 3 to 4 episodes of The Sopranos. And I watched a lot of UFC. Outside of that, I don't know if I watched anything on Netflix at all, because it was taking up a lot of my time before. I just didn't put the time in that place. The other thing was spending time with groups that weren't benefiting me. That sounds so selfish, but I'll be honest, like it's true. It's true. Like last year, I had said that I wanted to be more selfish with my time and not spend time with groups that weren't benefiting me as much. So in a lot of cases, I did pull back, especially when there was like parties on and stuff, that I didn't go out and I didn't go drinking and stuff. And it wasn't just because I didn't want to go drinking. It's because like I just knew that I wasn't going to gain anything from there. And I remember a friend saying to me, "Come on, he said, come on, it's always great to meet new people." This is when I was deep into it. He said, "It's always great to meet new people." And I said to him that he's like, "I don't, at this time right now for the next like 12 to 16 weeks, I don't need to meet any new people. Like I have my friends and I have the people that I talk to. I don't need to meet any new people right now, because I was so focused on really coming to understand that aspect of health, an aspect of like back injuries, and really wanted to dive deep on that. And I just didn't want any distractions. And I felt that if I met a lot of new people, that was going to be a new distraction, which I didn't need at that time. Now, it is a double-edged sword, because you do need to break out of that pattern. I understand that now more, that it's more important to have seasons where you go lay in and out. And when I look at what's something I want to do less of next year, it's first off moving around a lot, because moving really throws off your routine. I don't want to be stuck in routine though the whole time. I do want to have seasons where I work for really heavy periods and I do focus on a task for whatever 3 to 5 months, and then I take a couple of months off and then I go back in again. That's something that I want to do more this year. So too much routine is going to affect that. Did I prioritize something higher than it should have been? On reflection, probably jiu-jitsu was pretty high, considering that it definitely at certain stages of the year, to the detriment of everything else, a complete social life and work for sure. It took over work at some stages, and I prioritized solitude massively. This is where I come back to it. You have to look at it from both sides, which definitely impacted my ability to experience some of the city in Buenos Aires a bit more, because I just wanted to stay on the routine. So that was something that I need to be careful of, and my way of fixing that, I feel, is playing it in seasons instead. Like when I really think back on it, that's why this reflection is good. Have your heavy season and then pull back. Social media scrolling, I need to stop that. Like there's no benefit to it for me. I just do it too often. I feel like I'm learning something small, but I'm not, because I forget it straight away. Question number 6. So the last 3 questions is, what was your biggest success this year? And I want you to consider this. I want you to think about this as well. What was your biggest success this year? On a macro and a micro level, was it, let's say for some of my clients, to become a parent. They got married, got a promotion in work, they started a new sport, they achieved something in sport, they started a new activity or achieved a goal that they always set out for themselves, or they changed the direction of their lives in a lot of ways in a new direction that's more in line with the life that they want to live. Starting a new activity, returning to an old activity. On a micro level, it could be learning something small, being there for somebody. It could be charity, it could be moments of that you just in complete bliss. So many levels to this side of it. But when I look back on the year, and I focus on my side of what was my biggest success this year, I said it at the start, and it's something that I think it really resonates with me, or something that I'm. It makes me happy to think back on the year that I was able to be in a position, and I was lucky enough to be in a position to help people who were in need and who were struggling with certain things at times of the year, at the right time, that I was able to put energy into that, and that's what I work at. Honestly, that's a that is a huge one for me. Just being able to do that, and just being in a position that the stuff and the passion and the love that I have for the work that I do doesn't just benefit me, and that it benefits other people as well, I hope. But that honestly is a big one for me. When I look back on the year, that's something that really stood out, and I feel a success that I've been building for, trying to work on for the last couple of years, and it is something that I'm going to do for the rest of my life, where looking to always just improve my knowledge around that area. So yeah, that's something probably my biggest success of the year. Otherwise, learning about focus and solitude and levels to a subject, the way there's levels to back pain, there's levels to any injury, and there's levels to the pain that we feel. Learning about personally why people have certain injuries, think a certain way, have particular beliefs, and how they can be worked on or how they can improve them themselves. And I feel that my coaching took drastically improved as a result of that. Being able to keep friend groups, people around me, is something that I had to focus on as well. Like I know I talked about being in solitude and stuff like that, but I kept my circle close, and the people around me, I kept them close. And yes, I wasn't looking for new people all the time, but the people that were around me, I did keep them close. I think another one success is setting up in 2 different countries and creating different social groups and different routines in those countries, especially with the language barrier. I had to learn a lot about myself, body language, different things like that, and that was a nice one for me, I feel. And then obviously winning the Argentinian Campeonato competition and conversationally fluent in another language. Both of them were successes. Obviously, after success, question number 7, what was a moment that you failed this year? So when did you not achieve a goal you had set out, or why did it happen? And when were you not around for someone? When did you not live up to the values that you had? And for me, like, when I look back on the year, when did I fail this year? I think coming into the year, at the start of it, and looking at it now, I don't really like defining anything as a failure, so I nearly changed the phrasing of that question. I think not getting the business to where I expected it to be at this point, and the reason being for that is that I just didn't realize how much of an undertaking it was, and I didn't realize of how many rabbit holes I was going to go down on the subject of back pain. Like, I didn't understand how many levels, I was naive to how many levels there was to it. And it was like that, as I say, it was like that there was someone above looking down on me, picking different clients and different scenarios and different things like that, and just putting them in the way and just saying, okay, you feel like you have a good understanding of it now, try this one. And you see like you have a good understanding of it now, try this one. And then trying to consolidate all of that into a program and into a method that can work for anyone. That's another big one as well, is that, like, I didn't realize the levels that you needed to go through to actually start to do that, and I am now aware of them. And I think naivety is good, because naivety, you feel like, all right, I'll get that done there in 3 months, or I'll get that done in 12 weeks. And then when you're in the thick of it, because when you're enjoying it, you look back and say, well, there was 11 or 12 months gone there now, and I have obviously come a long way, but my God, I didn't think it would take that long. I thought it would all be all set up in 3 months. So I think that's a thing that I don't like to say failed on, but it was definitely something that when I look back on the year that was unexpected. A really specific one to fail on, this is for the jiu-jitsu heads, is standing up, holding a front headlock when you're fatigued, and not going to the ground on my knees. That's the reason I tore my ACL. So I stood up, I held a front headlock, I was trying to rest, your man stepped across me, and there's a video of it, you can see it on my Instagram page, and because I was resting for a second, and he tore my ACL. It was a contact ACL tear, which is unfortunate, so I injured my knee as a result. I know I will never do that again, which is a good one. I know the next time I get it, it's going straight to ground, but that was a very specific one. Otherwise, I think communicating poorly to the people close to me at times was something that I could have improved on. Brothers and sisters, not calling them enough, not calling my family enough. I think that's another big one. And with that then as well as understanding that there is certain times that I need to just cut out of the the coaching side of things and cut out of the physio head and the health head, because around my friends and around my family, because sometimes that people just want an ear to listen to, and I think that was something that I needed to improve on when I look back on the year. But yeah, all interesting ones. I'd like to hear what ones you feel like you failed at this year, or ones that you feel that you could have done better at, I suppose is better a way of phrasing that. Then the last two, what is something that you want to learn next year? I'm going to talk about the ones first off, what I said last year on the same podcast about what I wanted to learn last year, and then I will talk about what I want to do this year. And the reason I want to start with that is because last year I have 3 points. Number 1, become conversationally fluent in Spanish. And I was able to tick that off, which when I opened this up and I looked at this, I was like, no way. I said that I was going to do that. So that was a nice little one to remember, that I had set that goal out and I did become conversationally fluent in Spanish. Conversationally is a long stretch. Conversationally fluent contextually, I would say. Like, there's probably a better way of looking at it. Continuing to develop in jiu-jitsu. That was another one. Big one, and there's no way that I didn't do that because I spent so long doing it. Developing business and developing skills, they were other ones that I wanted to work on, and obviously as a result I've continued to do that, because they were my 3 focuses. When I look at that, they were my 3 focuses throughout the year, was developing all of that, and I feel like I achieved all of those, so I was delighted to see that. So when I was writing out this year, I was like, okay, well, let's be a bit more specific on what we can do. So when I look at what I can learn next year, and I want you to think about this as well yourself, I look at continuing to improve my knowledge of pain and injury, and continuing to improve the back bend course, no matter how many times I have to redo it, because I've redone it possibly 5 times now. And I just want to continue to improve on that and continue to get that into a better place. The other one then is to use the idea of seasons better. I talked about this earlier on, knowing when it's a work season versus when it's a relaxing season, and kind of setting out times. Like I have it here on the wall beside me. I'm in a 6-week season at the moment, and then after that I'm going to change, and then I'm going to go back into like a 12-week season, and I'm going to change, and that's another big one. So to use the idea of seasons, work season versus relaxing season. The other one then is becoming, I know this is kind of like, what are you doing? But becoming fluid in Portuguese, becoming conversational in Portuguese is the next one that I want to achieve from the languages front, because I'm here. It's a way nicer language sounding, even though when you listen to it, if you don't know Spanish and you listen to Portuguese, it sounds like it kind of mumbo jumbo. But now that I have a bit of Spanish and I listen to Portuguese, and like I can see what you focused in on, which is a really interesting thing about learning a language, because I can see what the Portuguese side of things, from my perspective of being a complete novice in it, is more focused on the rhythm and the tune of it. So it's like a song, and people describe it as a song. And I think for when you look at Spanish is like straight. It's like cut to the point. So it's a really interesting one. It's like, I don't know, where are you from? De donde vos is Spanish in a very bad Spanish accent. Or de donde sos. Sorry, de donde sos. And if you look at it in Portuguese, the action changes, and it's like de donde você. In that, it's like it's all up and down. I obviously butchered that, but it's nice to see that they use it. Some of the words are similar, but they use it in a nicer way. It seems it's like more of a song. So yeah, I want to get better at that. I do apologize for those listening to this who have to hear me try do a Spanish and a Portuguese accent. Please let me know how bad that was. But if I could become a bit more fluid in that. It also helps as well with getting the message out there and listening to UFC fighters on podcasts, which is another reason I wanted to do it, because they're interesting guys coming from Brazil. The last one on this then is just continuing to improve on striking and jiu-jitsu. I'm back into boxing now. I've been out of boxing for years. Anyone who knows me, boxing was my sport from when I was 4 years old up to 21, 22. I did it. It was my sport out and out, like my love for that long, and then I stopped doing it because I probably went too hard on it for a while. So I'm back into it now, which is nice, and then doing jiu-jitsu, and then obviously looking then to improve on the knee, get the knee back to 100% or better is the goal. They are some of the main ones. And then the very last one, question number 9, what's your favourite way to refuel? And For me, what I learned is one of my favorite ways to refuel this year, and I recommend it to everybody, is to clean my house. Like, my God, that's the effectiveness of that is crazy. Just cleaning up the room, sweeping the floor, getting everything in good order, just clears your whole head. And the act of doing it is so nice. Like, it's a really nice thing to do. So that was a big one for me, is just cleaning the house. And I found that was actually a way that I could disconnect and refuel. Boring, but that's the way it is. But if I was looking at other ways, then it's obviously training was a nice one. Sleeping, naps, getting into water, getting into nature, disconnecting, journaling, they're all nice ones. Reading and trying to learn new things. And then another one I picked up on is that speaking to family and friends. When I get off a long call with my family, and this is how I realized when I look back on the year that I was like, I didn't do that enough. In a lot of cases, I'm more refreshed. So I think that was a nice one as well. Going to the beach, another big one. So that's it now. That's the reflection on the year for 2023 for Robbie. And there's a lot more in that. As I said, there's a couple of podcasts in those learning points. I noticed that I didn't want this podcast to go on too long, but my God, honestly, I could do, and I will actually do this. I will do a podcast on those learning points, because some of the learning points I had this year, I feel if I could get them and package them in a nice way that people could understand them, which I've been trying to do, I feel that they can be really beneficial for others as well. And yeah, I just need to find out how to say it in less words, and how people can, if people do want to listen, or if people do want to learn them, great. So the main ones were impact on time and sleep and the subconscious, how those around you can impact your thinking, the benefit of focus and disconnection, which is also sleep and subconscious, understanding that emotions and they play in your system, how nature and consciousness play a role in health, the diagnosis that we've created and how they become crutches and ways to relieve responsibility for people. That's a broad statement, but I don't think there are ways for people to relieve responsibility. I feel that it's more that people, when they get them, they feel that, okay, well, I can't do anything about this. So it's not like they're deciding, yes, I have this diagnosis, I don't have to take care of it. It's more like, I've gotten this diagnosis, I don't know what to do, so I better live by it. So I hope that doesn't come across bad. Effective a bulging disc, that was an interesting one for me. Being really selfish with my time, and that was another one. Training around injury. They were all nice little revelations. So to go back over the 9 questions so you have them leaving, and I would love if you did this. I'd love if you just reached out, Mobility Tutor on Instagram, and let me know how you get on with them. Number 1 is, what made you feel most happy this year? Question number 2 is, what made you unhappy this year? Question number 3, what was the biggest lesson you learned this past year? Question number 4, what do you wish you would have done more of the year? Question number 5, what's something that you want to do less of next year? Question number 6, what was your biggest success this year? Question number 7 is, what was a moment that you failed this year? I would like to change that to what's a moment that you would improve on, but what's a moment you failed, I guess, is a nice one. But that's just my mindset towards it. Question number 8, what is something you want to learn next year? And question number 9, what's your favourite way to refuel? That's all of them. They are the questions. I would be wrong to not say this, is that anyone who is interested also, I have a group starting very soon, the next couple of weeks, with for a back pain group, and people who want to get back to exercise, who are active, who want to get back to an active and healthy lifestyle. If you know anyone, if you yourself, or if you know anyone who's dealing with, it can be back pain or shoulder pain, a persistent or recurring issue that keeps coming back, whether that be sciatica, bulging discs, degenerative disc disease, scoliosis, could be posture related pain, whatever you feel it is, or whatever diagnosis you've been given, you can contact me, send me a DM on Instagram at the Mobility Tutor, or you can just go straight in, and if you click the link in the description, it'll bring you to the page and it will talk through everything. There's a group starting soon. I have an early bird pricing that's there right now. It's $197 to get in, and for the next couple of weeks, probably less than a couple of weeks realistically, because it's cohort based, so there's only a limited number of people that can get into it. So the early bird, as I said, is $197, and then after that it's going to be going up to $297. So get it at €100 off right now. by clicking the link in the description. And yeah, that will take you straight there. Watch the video and see if it's something for you. If you're interested in getting yourself back to 100%, if you're interested in overcoming the fears and kind of having a body or having a vehicle, is how I describe it, that can take you through everything and you don't have to sit back and think, will it break down? Then it's definitely worth checking it out, and it's definitely worth jumping in with the group. What we'll be doing is we'll all start together, and every week then we're going to have weekly either Zoom calls or Q&A, and we will talk through everything. You will have the course in the background that you can go through, which has all of the educational stuff that I talked about here. That's why I said I had to keep redoing the course, because I kept on going into new levels of it, and I will continue to update the course. Right now, if for people to jump on board, we'll have the course forevermore, and they will have all the updates with that. And yeah, so if that's something that you're interested in, definitely check it out. You get the course, you get the group calls with me, you have the community group together, and at the same time then we have the goal of building up our running tolerance and getting back to like a 5k, but back to a healthy, active lifestyle is the goal right now. Check that out, it's in the description of this podcast. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it, and I hope that I was able to shed some light, and I hope you were able to get a better understanding of who I am as a person, and that some of the reflections that I had on the year. I know this is a very personal podcast. I talk about a lot of the stuff that maybe, and I was firing through it, so some of the stuff that maybe people wouldn't have known about me before or knew about the way I thought or my mindset. And yeah, it's I hope that it came across okay. I would love to hear your feedback on it. I'd love to hear if you learned anything from it, and I would love to hear your own reflections this year. That's all from me. I will chat to you all again soon, and I hope you all have a happy new year. Peace out from Robbie in Brazil. Have a good one. Okay guys, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're looking to learn more about what we do, as well as check out any of the mobility and Bria programs we have available, just head over to the description of this podcast and you will find a link to all the programs there. As always, thank you for listening, and I will chat to you all again in the next episode. Have a good one.